Well, it's been a busy week with global events, and joining us from Los Angeles via Skype is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Hi, Lisa. Good to have you with us. Let's begin with the recent Jersey City shootings. Now, the mayor says the real target of this anti-Semitic shooting may have been the neighboring yeshiva with some 50 children there. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a scary thought. And if there were any doubts as to whether or not these assailants were, anti-Semitic, and if this was a targeted hate crime, now we have so many reasons to believe that this was absolutely anti-Semitic in nature, and they were targeting Jews. Not only targeting Jews, but they would have gone after 50 innocent children just because of their faith. It's scary times. We're almost upon 2020, and to have these kinds of headlines over and over again, for someone to be able to target a group like that, to have so much hatred, to target the community supermarket, to go after children just because of their specific faith and the way that they worship is just unbelievable. We're going to
Hmm.
be hearing more and more details out of this, and it's always this, there's pros and cons. The more that these stories are told, it's almost as though we're seeing more copycat
Hmm.
attacks similar in nature for those who kind of have grievances against any group, feel like this is the time to share those grievances and like, act upon them in very, very violent and tragic ways. So yeah, it's awful, but the more we can raise awareness about this. I'll be speaking at a forum here in Los Angeles on Wednesday night about anti-Semitism. I think there are many communities now that are trying to really spread the word and create an awareness for all people of all faiths and all races and all ethnicities. And again, it's scary that this is 2020, and we have to remind people that it's okay to have differences.
Yeah, exactly. It is sad. Again, we hear this never again, right? We think back to the Holocaust, and here it is happening again around the world in so many ways. It's just something needs to change here. We need to learn from history. Now, protests turning violent in Lebanon. Can you explain what's behind all of that unrest?
Sure. It's interesting because we saw this surge of protests around the Middle East in 2010. That was what we called the Arab Spring. And the kind of liftoff of the Arab Spring took place in 2009 with the Iran Green Revolution. And what happened at that time? It was this feeling of we can do better. We know better. We're on the internet. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. We're seeing what's going on around the world. And now we're educated people, and the monarchies or the theocracies or the government that we know no longer suits us. We want better. Now we're seeing a second surge of that all around the world. I mean, everywhere you look, there are headlines about protests going on every continent. Latin America, we see protests going on in many countries. In Europe, in France, the protests are still going strong. In the Middle East, of course, they are in perpetual protest mode. And of course, we're seeing that in Iraq, in Iran, and now Lebanon. And Paul, in Lebanon, we hadn't heard much about Lebanon except for the rise and the surge of Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy terror organization, operating there like a cancerous cell. Now the people of Lebanon are saying, we want this terror cell out. Not only do we want this terror cell out, we want our government out because we want to be modern, we want to be secular, we want it all. And to their to their case, it's that the people of Lebanon are different in the Middle East. They're highly educated. They have equal rights. There's not there's less of this influence of Sharia law there. So you do have a chance for the people to modernize and move forward. And this is what they're telling the world.
Now, obviously, there's been some violence there from the government toward the protesters. What are the odds, I guess, of this actually having some good fruit to it? Will it come to a place of peace where, yes, they are going to make some changes, you think?
This has always been the question for the Middle East. Is the devil that we know better than the devil that we don't know? And could these political vacuums, if created, and if these governments are removed, who's to take the place? And in the case of many of these countries, there's no viable government to come next, and there's no ability on on the part of the people to nation build because they haven't done it for generations. They've just known one government, and it has been an infallible government that has been, ruling over, and in most cases in the form of a dictatorship. The case of Lebanon, it's a bit more mild, and the people have a bit more ability to do that, to vote. They have been doing so. They have more of a chance, and with, they have neighboring Israel to look at as an example of building somewhat of a democracy. And of course, democracy not by what we define it in the West, but what they would define as what comes as close to a democracy as possible for the Middle East. So in the case of Lebanon, I would say that there is a chance for at least their grievances to be heard, or for at least for them to ask for something and to get at least a bit of what they're asking for, if not all of it. So I think, what we saw in Egypt, for example, with the Arab Spring, it was that they came out, they didn't get what they really wanted, and they came out again. And I think the people of Lebanon, or the people of Hong Kong, or the people of Iran, they all show us this example of, we're not afraid to come back out onto the streets. So once you have the people or the population showing that they're not afraid to come back out onto the streets, that's something that's very, very serious and very, very much of an Achilles heel for the government. So I think that they'll want to do something about this. They'll want to at least hear the people out and make some changes to that so that they can go forward in some sort of stable way.
Turkey, the country, could close an American air base in the face of, U.S. threats of sanctions, I guess. And this air base has nukes on it as well, I understand. And this ties in with the Senate passing a resolution which recognizes the Armenian genocide. Do you think Turkey would actually do this, or is it kind of, more, a bit of a tool to stop the sanctions?
It could be. It could be a tool or some sort of, chest thumping to say, you can't do this to us. Look, Turkey has been riding a very comfortable wave, with regarding U.S. foreign policy. They've been a frenemy of the United States, a friend and enemy at the same time for a very long time. Under President Obama, they were just getting the checks. They didn't have to really be any bit of there wasn't any loyalty. We didn't call them out on anything, only because of these bases. Turkey has a geographic advantage that the U.S. has always wanted to use and have at its disposal, giving us a kind of a footstep in the Middle East, very close to Syria and Iran and Iraq and all the places where we want to be. But on the other hand, it seems like Turkey has been the one calling the shots. They get the financial aid, the foreign aid, and they also call the shots. And in this case, with President Trump, who's been trying to put on a friendly face and a friendly handshake towards Erdogan when he invited him to the White House not too long ago, he's still going to sanction them when they do bad things to the Kurds. And when when the Senate passed this resolution recognizing the Armenian genocide, I mean, that's a sore spot for the people of Turkey. So I think that the one thing that the Turks know they have over the United States are these air bases. So that's what they're threatening to do, and they know that that's what's going to hurt the U.S. with regards to our foreign policy and our motions in the region. So this has been a long time coming. I think the U.S. has wanted to confront Turkey on many things. I think whatever deal was cut between President Trump and Erdogan with regards to the Syria pullout, the U.S. is not happy with the way that the Turks handled it, and they sanctioned them. So I think that there has to be a serious conversation as to if you're getting the foreign aid, there has to be an alignment of interests as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're strange bedfellows, the U.S. and Turkey, that's for sure. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens here. And if they do, in fact, impose more sanctions here, wow. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. 2 Chinese diplomats expelled after breaching a U.S. military base here. Now, it's kind of more of a quiet expulsion, though, wasn't it?
Yes, because it doesn't look good for anybody, right? We're already on a very tumultuous path to cutting a deal with the Chinese. At the same time, it doesn't look good for our security apparatus to have these, Chinese people walking around. One of them was, this woman, if you remember the story from a while back, kind of walked onto Mar-a-Lago and was able to kind of have all of this recording apparatus on her. And in this case, these two individuals, they went onto the base and they claimed that they didn't understand when the guard was telling them not to move and go for any further. So obvious trespassing and obvious, reason for skepticism when it comes to China and when it comes to this specific crime, for lack of a better word, where the Chinese want to infiltrate. That's really their goal, whether it's in stealing technology or stealing patents or getting information. This is what they want to do. They want to infiltrate. So that's why this was a quiet expulsion. Get out. We don't want to ask any more questions. We don't want to know anymore, but you just can't be here.
Again, strange bedfellows, right? With this tension in the relationship with the this, giant trade partner in China. And briefly, do you want to touch base on phase one of their trade deal here? It stops, I guess, the taxes going up, I guess, against China. But is it going to go somewhere, you think?
Well, hopefully for Donald Trump, it'll go somewhere because I think all eyes are on China and whether this deal is going to go through. The reasons why it would go through is because, again, the incentive is for Donald Trump to push this through, to improve in an already roaring economy here in the United States, to lessen the tariffs and increase the exports out to China, and to obviously lessen the blow for those who import goods from China into the United States. Obviously, these two countries are very natural trade partners, especially as of late, where everything comes from China, right? Now, phase one is done, and what I'm hearing is that they've kind of cut out the rest of the deal as well, and it looks pretty good. Whether or not to believe that, we know that phase one is done, but phase one is easy. What becomes difficult is that the Chinese are not willing to concede on points that involve what I said before, and that involve, again, stealing of technology, stealing of patents, intellectual property. That's exactly the where they kind of are like, wait a minute, we almost can't stop cheating. So I think the U.S. wants to put a very a more strict control on these aspects, and lessen the tariffs, because everyone wins. If this deal should go through, both sides will win, but the Chinese have to be willing to concede, and the U.S. knows that they have the upper hand when it comes to this deal, and they're going to hold Chinese to it.
Well, let's play fair. Yeah, it sounds good. Okay, I'm out of time here. Thank you, as always, Lisa, for your insight into these issues.
My pleasure.